Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey behind the gilded gates of palaces, into a world of unspoken rules, silent suffering, and carefully controlled smiles. We're going to explore something that millions of people fantasize about but few truly understand: what it is really like to be a royal woman, to wake up every morning knowing that your every move, your every word, even your sitting position and the colour of your nail polish, are subject to centuries old rules that you had no part in creating. Before we dive into this fascinating and often heartbreaking world, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button. It really helps me continue creating these bedtime history stories for you. I am genuinely curious. Where are you right now? Are you tucked in bed scrolling through your phone, perhaps dreaming about what it would be like to be a princess? Are you curled up on the couch, safe in the knowledge that you can wear whatever you want tomorrow, eat whatever you choose, speak your mind freely? Tonight, I want you to appreciate those freedoms, because as we step into the world of royal women, we'll discover that the crown comes with invisible chains. Wherever you are, I want you to dim those lights, get comfortable, and let's travel into the secret world of royal protocol, where fairy tales meet harsh reality. What if I told you that when Kate Middleton married Prince William in 2011, she had to sign away her right to privacy, her ability to vote, her freedom to choose her own clothes, and even her control over where and when she could see her own family? What if I told you that Princess Diana was once reprimanded by palace officials for crossing her legs the wrong way, for touching people too warmly, for showing too much emotion in public? What if I told you that Meghan Markle discovered, within weeks of joining the royal family, that there were rules governing everything from the angle at which she should hold her handbag to the exact shade of nude pantyhose she must wear at all times in public? According to research by Professor Kate Williams from the University of Reading, whose work on royal history reveals the hidden constraints of royal life, modern royal women face over 200 documented rules of protocol, many of them unwritten but strictly enforced. These aren't just polite suggestions. These are requirements backed by centuries of tradition, monitored by palace staff, and enforced through social pressure, media criticism, and the constant threat of being labelled unroyal or inappropriate. Think about that for a moment. 200 rules governing your daily life. Rules about how you sit, how you stand, how you walk downstairs, how you hold a teacup, how you get out of a car, how you shake hands, how you smile, what colours you can wear to which events, when you are allowed to show emotion and when you must remain stoic, how you interact with your own husband in public, when you are permitted to speak and when you must remain silent. These women live in a gilded cage, their every moment choreographed, their every instinct suppressed, their authentic selves buried under layers of protocol and expectation. Tonight, I am going to take you inside this world. You'll meet women who've lived under these rules, some who've broken them and paid the price, some who've mastered them and found ways to work within them, and some who've been crushed by the weight of royal expectations. You'll discover the secret rules about appearance, about behaviour, about reproduction, about marriage, about motherhood, about speech, about emotion. We'll explore why these rules exist, what happens when they're broken, and what it costs women psychologically and emotionally to live under this system. And we'll understand that the life of a princess is not the fairy tale we imagine, but something far more complex, far more restrictive, and often far more painful. Tonight's journey begins in the year 1981, in a modest apartment in London, on the morning that would change Diana Spencer's life forever. Diana is 19 years old, working as a nursery school teacher, living a relatively normal life despite her aristocratic background. This morning, she is about to have a private meeting with Queen Elizabeth II, her future mother-in-law, and she is terrified. She has been dating Prince Charles for several months, and everyone knows a proposal is coming. But what Diana doesn't yet fully understand is that accepting Charles's proposal means accepting a life governed by rules she has never even heard of. Rules that will control everything from what she eats for breakfast to how she is allowed to mourn when someone dies. according to research by royal biographer Tina Brown, whose detailed account of Diana's life draws on interviews with palace insiders. Diana entered her engagement to Charles with a romantic, naive vision of royal life. She imagined glamorous state dinners, charitable work, a loving marriage, perhaps some restrictions on her freedom, but nothing she couldn't handle. What she encountered was something entirely different, a system so rigid, so all-encompassing, so unforgiving, that it would eventually contribute to the breakdown of her mental health, her marriage, and ultimately, in many ways, her life. Let me tell you about Diana's first week as an engaged woman, because it reveals so much about what royal women face. The moment her engagement to Charles was announced, Diana's life stopped being her own. She was immediately moved out of her apartment and into Clarence's house, where she was essentially isolated from her friends and family. She was assigned a lady-in-waiting, a press secretary, and various other staff members whose job was not just to help her but to monitor her, to make sure she was learning the rules, conforming to expectations. She was given a thick binder, literally hundreds of pages, detailing the protocols she would need to follow. How to curtsy to different ranks of royalty, different depths for different people, how to enter a room, how to exit a room, how to walk downstairs in a way that photographs well, how to sit always with her knees together and ankles crossed, never crossing her legs at the knee, how to stand, shoulders back, hands clasped in front or behind, never fidgeting, how to hold her purse in her left hand so her right is always free for handshakes, and never on the table during meals. According to Tina Brown's research, Diana was overwhelmed. She had less than 6 months to learn these rules before the wedding, to transform herself from an ordinary young woman into a princess who would be photographed constantly, criticized for every tiny mistake, expected to be perfect at all times. And the rules weren't just about etiquette, they were about control, about molding Diana into a specific image that the royal family wanted to project. She was told how to wear her hair, longer and more feminine than her natural short style. She was told what colours she could wear to which events, with staff literally laying out her clothes for her and explaining why certain choices were inappropriate. She was told to lose weight, even though she was already slim, because the camera adds pounds and princesses must be thin. She was told to wear more makeup than she was comfortable with, because palace officials felt her natural look was too plain. She was told to speak less, to let Charles do the talking, to stand slightly behind him, to gaze at him admiringly even when she disagreed with what he was saying. According to Professor Kate Williams, these rules about appearance and behavior weren't arbitrary. They were designed to create a specific image, the perfect princess, beautiful but not threatening, elegant but not too fashion, forward, friendly but not too familiar, intelligent but not too opinionated. Diana was being transformed into a symbol, and the process required erasing much of who she actually was. But here is what really broke Diana's heart: the rules about emotion. Royal women are not supposed to show strong emotions in public. They can smile, a gentle, controlled smile. They can look mildly pleased or appropriately solemn at funerals. But they cannot laugh too loudly, cannot cry openly, cannot show anger, cannot display frustration or exhaustion or fear. Emotions must be controlled, contained, hidden behind a mask of composure. For Diana, who was naturally warm, expressive, emotional, this was torture. She was a hugger in a family that didn't touch. She was empathetic and openly emotional in a system that valued stoicism. She wanted to connect genuinely with people, but protocol kept her at a distance. According to Tina Brown, Diana described feeling like she was suffocating, like she was playing a role in a play that never ended, never allowed her to be herself. And when she tried to express these feelings to Charles or to palace officials, she was told she was being too sensitive, that she needed to toughen up, that this was simply what royal life required. Her emotions, her authentic self, were seen as problems to be managed, not aspects of her humanity to be respected. Within a year of her wedding, Diana was struggling with bulimia, a eating disorder that she later acknowledged was her attempt to exert some control over her life when everything else was controlled for her. She was also battling depression, feeling isolated and trapped, and yet she had to continue to smile, to wave, to play the role of the happy princess. The rules wouldn't allow her to be honest about her struggles, wouldn't permit her to seek help openly, wouldn't let her show weakness. According to Professor Wendy Berry Mendez from the University of California, San Francisco, whose research on the psychology of constrained behavior reveals the mental health impacts, constantly suppressing authentic emotion and behavior creates enormous psychological stress. It is associated with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and various physical health problems. Diana was living proof of this. The rules that were supposed to make her a perfect princess were actually destroying her from the inside. Now let me tell you about another rule that Diana discovered, the reproductive rule. Royal women are expected to produce heirs, preferably male heirs, and they're expected to do so quickly. Diana felt enormous pressure to become pregnant as soon as possible after her wedding, according to research by royal historian Robert Lacey, whose work documents the expectations placed on royal brides. Diana was aware that her primary function in the eyes of the institution was to produce an heir and a spare, sons to continue the royal line. She became pregnant with William within a year of her wedding, but the pregnancy was difficult. She suffered from severe morning sickness, was exhausted and emotionally fragile, and yet she was expected to continue performing royal duties, to appear in public looking perfect, to hide her suffering behind that practiced smile. When she did occasionally show her discomfort or fatigue, she was criticized in the press for being weak or for not taking her duties seriously enough. After William's birth, Diana had less than 2 years before she was pregnant again with Harry. 2 pregnancies in 3 years, all while learning how to be a royal, dealing with an unhappy marriage, struggling with mental health issues, and being scrutinized constantly by the media. The pressure was immense, and it was made worse by the unspoken rule that royal women don't complain, don't ask for help, don't admit they're struggling. According to Professor Kate Williams, Diana later said that the years of her son's early childhood were some of her darkest, when she felt most trapped, most alone, most desperate. But she had to maintain the image of the perfect royal mother, smiling for the cameras, appearing to have it all together, even when she was falling apart. Let me tell you about the rules Diana broke, because her story is also one of resistance, of a woman who gradually learned to push back against the system that was crushing her. She started small, touching people during public engagements, shaking hands with AIDS patients when it was still controversial, hugging children openly. These seem like tiny things, but in the rigid world of royal protocol, they were revolutionary. Diana was introducing warmth and authenticity into a system built on distance and formality. She also began to dress in ways that expressed her own style rather than just following palace dictates. She wore bold colours, fashion, forward designs, and she used her clothes to send messages, like the famous revenge dress. She wore the night Charles admitted to his affair with Camilla. According to fashion historian Hilary Lynn from Historic Royal Palaces, Diana's fashion choices became a form of communication, a way to express feelings and opinions she wasn't allowed to speak aloud. The palace hated this. They felt she was becoming too much of a celebrity, overshadowing Charles, drawing attention to herself rather than to the institution. There were constant battles over her wardrobe, her public appearances, her level of visibility. But Diana had discovered something powerful. The rules could be bent, even broken, if she was willing to face the consequences. And she was. She spoke to the press, gave interviews, told her side of the story in ways that violated every rule of royal discretion. She divorced Charles, an almost unthinkable act for a royal woman at the time. She dated openly, lived her life on her own terms, and in doing so, she exposed the suffocating nature of the rules she'd been forced to follow. The palace never forgave her for this. She was stripped of her HRH title, distanced from the family, criticized constantly. But Diana had found a kind of freedom, even if it came at enormous cost. She was finally living authentically, following her own conscience, using her platform for causes she genuinely cared about. According to Tina Brown, Diana in her final years was happier than she'd been since before her wedding. Despite all the challenges she faced, she had broken free of the invisible chains, and she'd shown other royal women that it was possible to be both royal and authentic, to follow some rules while rejecting others. Her death in 1997 was a tragedy, but her legacy is complex. She revealed to the world what life was really like behind palace walls, and she changed royal protocol forever, pushing the institution to become slightly more humane, slightly more flexible, slightly more willing to see royal women as human beings rather than just symbolic figures. Now let me tell you about Kate Middleton, who entered the royal family 14 years after Diana's death, and who faced many of the same rules but approached them very differently. Kate's story reveals another way of navigating the system, not by breaking the rules, but by mastering them so completely that she gains respect and eventually some degree of autonomy within the constraints. Kate dated William for nearly a decade before they married, and according to research by royal correspondent Katie Nicholl, whose book documents Kate's preparation for royal life, Kate used those years deliberately to prepare herself. She studied Diana's mistakes, learned the protocols, practiced the behaviors, transformed herself gradually from a middle-class university student into someone who could seamlessly fit into the royal world. Unlike Diana, who had 6 months to prepare, Kate had almost 10 years. She learned how to dress appropriately, favouring British designers, choosing modest lengths and necklines, sticking to royal-approved colours and styles. She learned how to speak carefully, to avoid controversial topics, to smile pleasantly without saying much of substance. She learned how to curtsy perfectly, to walk gracefully, to enter and exit cars without flashing photographers, to sit for hours at formal events without fidgeting. According to Katie Nicholl, Kate approached becoming a royal like a job she was training for, studying the requirements, practicing the skills, preparing herself mentally for the loss of freedom and privacy that would come with the role. When Kate married William in 2011, she was ready. She followed every rule flawlessly. She wore the correct amount of nude pantyhose, held her bouquet at the precise angle, smiled with the appropriate level of warmth without appearing too casual, curtsied to the Queen at the exact right depth. The palace was delighted. Here was a royal woman who understood her role, who didn't challenge the system, who made their job easy. And Kate has continued in this vein for over a decade now. She dresses beautifully but conservatively. She supports non-controversial charities. She speaks rarely and carefully when she does speak. She maintains an image of perfect domesticity, the ideal royal mother. She has produced 3 children, including the all-important male heir. She has never given a controversial interview, never criticized the institution, never publicly complained about the constraints of her role. According to Professor Kate Williams, Kate has essentially become what the palace always wanted Diana to be: the perfect princess, beautiful, elegant, dutiful, and silent about any difficulties she may face. But here is the question: what does this perfection cost her? Kate has given almost no interviews, shares almost nothing personal, maintains a facade so perfect it is almost impossible to know who she really is behind it. Is she happy? Is she fulfilled? Does she ever feel trapped or frustrated? We don't know, because Kate follows the rule that royal women don't complain, don't reveal vulnerabilities, don't let the public see behind the mask. Some people admire Kate for her professionalism, for her dedication to duty, for the way she has made royal life look effortless. Others wonder what it costs her psychologically to maintain this level of control, to suppress her authentic self so completely. According to Professor Wendy Berry Mendez's research, even when people successfully suppress emotion and behavior, there are psychological costs. Stress hormones remain elevated, anxiety can develop, and a sense of disconnection from one's authentic self is common. Kate may look perfectly content from the outside, but we have no way of knowing what she experiences privately, because the rules of royal life forbid her from telling us. Now let me tell you about Meghan Markle, whose approach to royal rules was entirely different from both Diana's and Kate's, and whose story reveals just how unforgiving the system can be when a woman doesn't conform. Meghan entered the royal family in 2018, and from the very beginning she struggled with the rules in ways that made palace officials deeply uncomfortable. Meghan was American, a self-made successful actress, used to speaking her mind, expressing herself through fashion and social media, advocating openly for causes she believed in. She was 36 years old when she married Harry, already established in her identity and career, and she was asked to give all of that up to transform herself into a proper royal wife, to follow rules that made no sense to her and seemed designed to diminish rather than empower her. According to research by royal correspondents Omid Scobie and Carolyn Durand, whose book chronicles Meghan and Harry's time in the royal family, Meghan clashed with royal protocol almost immediately. She wanted to hug people during engagements, to speak openly about issues she cared about like feminism and racial justice. She wanted to wear colours and styles that reflected her personality, to keep in touch with her friends in the US, to maintain some elements of her pre-royal identity. The palace said no to almost everything. She was told she was too American, too informal, too opinionated, too much. The nude pantyhose rule particularly irritated her. She felt it was outdated and uncomfortable. She questioned why she couldn't close her own car door, why she couldn't cross her legs, why she had to hold her handbag a certain way. Palace officials felt she wasn't respecting tradition, wasn't willing to learn, was being difficult. The British tabloid press picked up on the tensions and ran endless stories about Meghan breaking protocol, being rude to staff, causing drama. Much of this coverage was tinged with racism and sexism, criticising Meghan for behaviours that would have been overlooked in a white royal. According to Scobie and Durand, Meghan felt she couldn't win. If she followed all the rules perfectly, she was being inauthentic. If she tried to maintain any of her identity, she was breaking protocol. The constant criticism took an enormous toll on her mental health. She later revealed that she experienced suicidal thoughts during her time as a working royal, that she felt trapped, silenced, and without support. She asked for help from palace officials and was told that getting mental health treatment would reflect badly on the institution. Think about that. A woman experiencing suicidal ideation, asking for help, and being told that the institution's image is more important than her well-being. This is what happens when rules and tradition are valued above human needs. Meghan and Harry's decision to step back from royal duties and move to the United States was controversial, but from Meghan's perspective, it was necessary for survival. She couldn't continue to live under rules that were destroying her mental health, in an environment where she felt unsupported and constantly attacked. The palace and the British press portrayed this as Meghan being difficult, unable to hack royal life, abandoning duty. But Meghan saw it as choosing her well-being and her family over an institution that didn't value her humanity. Her decision to speak publicly about her experiences in an interview with Oprah Winfrey broke one of the most fundamental rules. Royal women don't tell their stories, don't criticize the institution, maintain the facade regardless of personal cost. The backlash was swift and harsh. Many people accused Meghan of being disrespectful, of lying, of trying to destroy the monarchy, but others saw her as incredibly brave, speaking truth to power, refusing to be silenced by rules that prioritize institutional image over individual well-being. According to Professor Kate Williams, Meghan's story reveals the limits of royal reform. Despite Diana's efforts to humanize the monarchy, despite modest changes in protocol over recent decades, the institution remains fundamentally rigid, unwilling to truly accommodate women who don't fit a very narrow mold. Let me tell you about some of the specific secret rules that these women and others have had to follow, because understanding the details helps us grasp the full extent of the control. According to research by British etiquette expert Micah Mayer, who has studied royal protocol extensively, there are rules governing virtually every aspect of a royal woman's appearance and behaviour. Let's start with clothing rules, because these are numerous and specific. Royal women must wear nude pantyhose with skirts and dresses no matter the weather. This rule dates back to the Queen's preferences and is rigidly enforced. Meghan's occasional bare legs were considered scandalous breaches of protocol. Skirts and dresses must be of a certain length, typically knee length or slightly below, never too short, but also not so long as to be impractical or unfashionable. Necklines must be modest, no cleavage showing at formal events. Sleeves are preferred for formal occasions, though sleeveless is permitted in very hot weather or for evening events. Colours and patterns must be carefully chosen. Bright colours are good for visibility at public events, but certain colours are reserved for certain occasions. Black is only for funerals or remembrance events unless you are the Queen. White or cream dresses are avoided at events where the Queen is present, as you don't want to upstage her. According to Micah Mayer, royal women work closely with stylists and palace staff to ensure every outfit is appropriate for the specific event, taking into account not just fashion but symbolism, protocol, and the likelihood of causing offence. Shoes must be closed-toe for most formal events, with heel heights that are practical for standing for long periods. Wedges are technically forbidden for the most formal occasions, though Kate has occasionally bent this rule. Handbags are always carried in the left hand, leaving the right free for handshaking. The bag serves a practical purpose, but also a symbolic one, creating a barrier between the royal woman and people who might get too close or try to touch her inappropriately. Jewellery must be appropriate to the occasion and rank. Tiaras are only for the most formal white tie events, and only for married royal women. Before marriage, even a princess by birth cannot wear a tiara. Certain pieces of jewellery belong to the royal collection, and their use is carefully controlled. Kate's sapphire engagement ring, which belonged to Diana, had to be approved by the Queen before William could give it to her. According to Micah Mayer, every piece of jewellery visible in public photographs is analysed for its symbolism and appropriateness. Now let's talk about behaviour rules, which are even more extensive. Royal women must sit in a specific way. The Duchess slant, with knees together and legs slanted to one side, or with ankles crossed. Never cross legs at the knee in formal settings. Never sit with legs apart. When standing, posture must be impeccable. Shoulders back, hands clasped in front or behind, or holding a clutch. Never slouch, never fidget, never put hands in pockets. Walking must be graceful and measured. No rushing, no casual strolling. When walking downstairs, place the ball of the foot down first, not the heel, to maintain elegance and avoid tripping. When exiting a car, swivel both legs together, keep knees pressed together. Use a discreet hand motion to check that your skirt is in place before standing. This Duchess exit has been perfected by Kate and takes practice to look effortless. Physical contact with non-royals is carefully regulated. Handshakes are acceptable, brief and formal. Hugs are generally inappropriate, except in very specific circumstances. Diana broke this rule constantly, but it made palace officials uncomfortable. Meghan's natural warmth and tendency to hug was seen as too familiar, too American. Royal women must maintain a certain distance, a boundary that reminds everyone of their special status. According to etiquette expert William Hanson, whose work documents royal protocol, these rules about physical contact are about maintaining the mystique and dignity of royalty. Too much familiarity, too much warmth, and royals become just like everyone else. The institution wants royal women to be simultaneously accessible and untouchable, friendly but not friends, warm but not intimate. It is a nearly impossible balance. Speech is also highly controlled. Royal women are trained to speak in specific ways, avoiding controversial topics, staying politically neutral, keeping conversations light and pleasant. They're taught certain phrases that can get them gracefully out of awkward situations. They learn to deflect personal questions, to give answers that sound warm but reveal nothing substantive. According to research by phonetics expert G.F. Lindsay, who has analysed royal speech patterns, royal women often develop a specific accent and speaking style over time, more formal and carefully enunciated than their natural speech. This is both unconscious adaptation and conscious training. Kate's accent has become noticeably more refined and posh over her years in the royal family. Meghan was reportedly given elocution coaching to soften her American accent and adopt more British speech patterns, though it is unclear how much of this she actually implemented. Public displays of affection between royal couples are minimised. Hand-holding is generally avoided at formal events, though William and Kate occasionally hold hands at less formal engagements. Kissing in public is rare and usually only at weddings or very special occasions. The Queen and Prince Philip famously never showed public affection. Charles and Diana were slightly more demonstrative, but were criticised for it. Harry and Meghan held hands frequently and were seen as breaking protocol, though they felt they were simply being authentic. According to Professor Kate Williams, these rules about affection are about maintaining dignity and formality, but they also reveal a discomfort with emotion and intimacy that pervades the institution. Royal life is about duty and service, not personal feelings, and public displays of affection are seen as inappropriately personal, making private feelings public in a way that makes the institution uncomfortable. Now let me tell you about the rules around pregnancy and childbirth, because these are particularly revealing of how royal women's bodies are controlled. When a royal woman is pregnant, there are protocols governing when and how the pregnancy is announced, usually waiting until 12 weeks to ensure the pregnancy is viable. The announcement must be carefully worded and released through official palace channels. Social media posts or personal announcements are not permitted. According to royal correspondent Victoria Arbiter, whose work covers royal births, pregnant royal women are expected to continue public duties as long as possible, with modifications only for medical necessity. Kate famously struggled with severe morning sickness during all 3 of her pregnancies, but continued attending events when possible, sometimes looking visibly unwell, but maintaining her composure. Fashion during pregnancy is carefully managed. Maternity clothes must still follow all the protocol rules. Modest, elegant, appropriate. Kate's pregnancy wardrobe, often featuring coat dresses and tailored outfits, became a blueprint for appropriate royal maternity fashion. Meghan's slightly more fashion-forward and body-conscious maternity looks were criticised as too casual or attention-seeking. When it is time to give birth, royal women traditionally give birth at private wings of hospitals, never at home in recent decades, and always with significant security. The birth must be registered with the palace before being registered officially, ensuring the palace can coordinate announcements. The new mother is expected to appear publicly within hours of giving birth, looking polished and put together. Kate's appearances on the hospital steps just hours after delivering each of her children, dressed perfectly, hair and makeup done, smiling and waving, sparked much discussion. Many women felt this set an unrealistic expectation that new mothers should be allowed to recover privately without pressure to look perfect immediately. But Kate was following protocol, doing what royal women are expected to do, presenting the heir to the public, demonstrating that all is well, maintaining the image of effortless perfection, even at one of life's most physically and emotionally intense moments. Naming of royal children follows protocol. The name must be approved by the Queen before being publicly announced. Certain names are considered appropriate, others are too trendy or too common. The name should honour family history, preferably including names of previous royals. George, Charlotte, and Louis all have deep royal connections. Archie and Lilibet, Harry and Meghan's children, were more unusual choices, and there was reportedly some palace discomfort with these less traditional names. Christenings must follow Anglican rites and traditions, with approved godparents in approved locations, with guest lists managed by the palace. Even the christening gown has protocol, traditionally a replica of a Victorian-era gown used for generations of royal babies. According to Victoria Arbiter, every aspect of a royal birth and the baby's early life is choreographed and controlled, leaving little room for the parents' personal preferences. Now, let me tell you about Queen Elizabeth II herself, because understanding her relationship with these rules helps us understand the entire system. Elizabeth became queen at age 25, unexpectedly early because her uncle abdicated and her father became king. She has reigned for over 70 years, and during that time, she has been the embodiment of duty, protocol, and service. According to research by royal biographer Sarah Bradford, whose comprehensive biography of Elizabeth draws on extensive sources, the Queen learned very young that personal feelings, desires, and needs must always be subordinated to duty and role. Elizabeth reportedly wanted to marry Philip, but the match was controversial, and she had to wait and prove her commitment before the marriage was approved. She wanted to pursue a more normal family life, but was told that the needs of the monarchy came first. She wanted to be a hands-on mother but royal protocol, and her duties meant her children were raised largely by nannies. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth has followed every rule, maintained every protocol, never given a personal interview, never expressed political opinions publicly, never shown her authentic feelings except in the most carefully controlled circumstances. She has been, in every way, the perfect constitutional monarch, dutiful and restrained. But according to Sarah Bradford, people who know Elizabeth privately say she has sometimes found this role lonely, isolating, and emotionally constraining. She loves her role and takes her duty seriously, but being queen has required her to suppress much of her personality, to live behind a mask of formality, to sacrifice personal relationships and experiences for the institution, and she has, in turn, expected the same of other royal women, enforcing the rules strictly, showing little sympathy for those like Diana or Meghan who struggled with the constraints. Elizabeth's own success at suppressing her authentic self for duty has made it hard for her to understand or accommodate women who cannot or will not do the same. The rules she follows and enforces aren't arbitrary. They reflect her deeply held belief that monarchy requires sacrifice, that being royal is about service and duty, not personal happiness or self-expression. According to Professor Kate Williams, Elizabeth represents an older model of royalty, one that prioritizes institution over individual, duty over happiness, tradition over change. This model worked for Elizabeth, but it has proven increasingly difficult for younger royal women who have grown up in a different era with different expectations about women's autonomy, emotional expression, and personal fulfillment. The clash between Elizabeth's generation and younger royals like Diana, Meghan, and even Kate reflects a broader social tension about women's roles. The balance between duty and self-expression, and whether it is possible to be both an authentic individual and a symbolic figure. Now, let me tell you about some historical royal women and the rules they faced, because understanding the historical context helps us see how little has changed in many ways. Let's talk about Queen Victoria, who reigned in the 19th century and faced intense scrutiny and control despite being the monarch herself. According to research by historian Helen Rappaport, whose work documents Victoria's life, even as Queen, Victoria faced restrictions on her behaviour, dress, and expression. She was expected to dress in specific ways, to maintain a dignified demeanour, to suppress her considerable temper and strong opinions in public. When she mourned her husband Albert's death with extended and intense grief, wearing black for decades, she was criticised for being too emotional, too self-indulgent, for neglecting her duties. Victoria loved Albert deeply and his death devastated her, but the expectation was that she would mourn appropriately for a time and then return to full public life. Her extended mourning was seen as a breach of royal duty, a failure to put the institution above personal feeling. Eventually, pressure from her government and advisors forced her back into public life, even though privately she never stopped grieving. Victoria's experience reveals that even a ruling queen faced pressure to conform to expectations about how a royal woman should behave, what emotions she should show, how she should balance personal needs with public duty. Let me tell you about Alexandra of Denmark, who married the future King Edward VII in the late 19th century. According to research by royal historian Theo Aronson, Alexandra faced rigid rules about behaviour, dress, and speech. She was expected to always appear perfectly elegant, to never show anger or displeasure, even when her husband openly conducted affairs to produce heirs and then step back from her children's upbringing. Alexandra struggled with deafness, which made public events difficult and sometimes embarrassing, but she was expected to hide her disability, to never let anyone see her struggle. She developed strategies to cope, positioning herself where she could read lips, relying on her husband or staff to repeat things, but always maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The rule was that royal women don't show weakness, don't have disabilities, don't admit to struggles. Alexandra lived her entire royal life, accommodating her hearing loss privately, while appearing perfectly normal publicly. Let me tell you about Wallis Simpson, the American divorcee for whom King Edward VIII abdicated the throne in 1936. Wallis's story is often told as a romance, but it is also about the rigid rules that made it impossible for Edward to marry her while remaining king. Wallis was divorced twice, and this made her completely unacceptable as a royal wife according to the rules of the time. The Church of England, of which the king is head, didn't recognise divorce, and it was simply impossible for a divorced woman to become queen. Edward chose Wallis over the throne, abdicating so he could marry her, and they lived the rest of their lives in exile, technically royals, but excluded from official roles and family events. According to research by Anne Seber, whose biography of Wallis examines her life and legacy, Wallis was blamed for the abdication, vilified in the British press, called a manipulator and a home wrecker. But the real issue was the inflexible rule that a divorced woman couldn't be queen. Wallis wanted to marry the man she loved, and Edward wanted to marry her, but the institution couldn't accommodate this. The rules were more important than individual happiness, more important than love, more important than the king's own wishes. This story illustrates how rigid and unforgiving royal protocol can be, especially for women who don't fit the narrow acceptable model. Now let me tell you about more specific rules that modern royal women face, rules so detailed and pervasive that they govern almost every moment of public life. According to Micah Meyer's extensive documentation of royal protocol, there are rules about food and eating that are particularly strict. Royal women must eat slowly and delicately, taking small bites, chewing thoroughly, never speaking with food in their mouths. They must hold utensils in the continental style, fork in left hand, knife in right, never switching American style. They must pace their eating to finish each course at approximately the same time as the Queen or senior royals, never finishing too quickly or too slowly. Certain foods are forbidden at formal dinners because they're messy or difficult to eat gracefully. Shellfish is often avoided due to allergy risk. Garlic is avoided before public engagements to prevent bad breath. Spicy foods are avoided to prevent sweating or digestive issues. Rare meat is avoided due to food poisoning risk. According to Darren McGrady, former royal chef who has written about his experiences, meal planning for royals involves extensive consideration of what is appropriate, what is safe, and what can be eaten gracefully while wearing formal clothes and being photographed. Royal women are also expected to leave food on their plates to demonstrate restraint and good breeding, never cleaning the plate completely, no matter how hungry they are. They must stop eating when the Queen stops eating, even if they haven't finished their meal. This rule has caused some awkward moments when the Queen finishes quickly and younger royals are left with full plates being cleared away. Drinking rules are equally strict. Royal women may drink alcohol at formal events, but only in moderation, typically 1 or 2 glasses maximum. They must sip slowly, never gulp. Wine glasses should be held by the stem, never by the bowl. Champagne flutes should be held near the base. When toasting, they lift their glass but don't clink it against others' glasses, a rule based on avoiding breakage and maintaining dignity. According to etiquette expert William Hanson, these rules about eating and drinking are designed to maintain elegance and control at all times, to ensure that royal women never appear undignified, never lose control, never prioritize physical appetites over appropriate behavior. The message is clear: even basic bodily needs like hunger and thirst must be subordinated to protocol and image. Let me tell you about the rules around travel, because even how royal women move from place to place is carefully regulated. When travelling by car, there is a specific order of precedence determining who sits where. The Queen always sits in the back right, the most senior position. Other royals are seated according to rank. Royal women must enter and exit cars in specific ways. The Duchess slant exit that keeps knees together and prevents any immodest exposure. They're trained to check their skirt position discreetly before standing, to move gracefully despite the awkwardness of the manoeuvre. According to royal correspondent Victoria Arbiter, royal women practice this exit technique until it becomes second nature, because a careless moment caught on camera can generate negative press for months. On planes, royal women must follow specific protocols. The Queen and direct heirs to the throne are not supposed to travel together on the same plane to prevent a catastrophic loss of succession. This rule is sometimes relaxed for children, but William and Kate have been asked to travel separately as William's position in succession became more important. On the plane, seating follows precedence, with the most senior royals in the best positions. Let me tell you about the rules around social media, a relatively new challenge for the monarchy. Royal women are essentially forbidden from having personal social media accounts. All social media presence must be through official palace accounts, carefully managed by communications staff. Content is reviewed before posting, comments are monitored and often disabled, and nothing personal or controversial can ever be shared. Meghan had to delete her personal Instagram account, which had millions of followers and was the important part of her career and identity. She had to stop her lifestyle blog, The Tig, which she had built over years. She couldn't post photos of her son Archie when and how she wanted. All images had to go through palace communications. According to Omid Scobie and Carolyn Durand, this loss of control over her own image and voice was one of the most difficult adjustments for Meghan. In the modern world, social media is how people connect, share their lives, build their identity. But royal women are cut off from this, forced to communicate only through carefully curated official channels that reveal nothing personal or authentic. The rules around charity work and public service are also extensive. Royal women are expected to support charities and causes, but these must be carefully chosen to be non-controversial, politically neutral, and appropriate to their role. They can't advocate for political issues, can't criticize government policy, can't align themselves with partisan causes. Their charitable work must be diverse enough to show broad concern, but not so scattered that they lack focus. They must give speeches at charity events, but these speeches must be carefully written, reviewed by palace staff, and delivered in specific ways. According to royal correspondent Katie Nicholl, Kate's early speeches were noticeably nervous, her voice shaking, her hands trembling. She worked with voice coaches and public speaking experts to develop the confident, polished delivery she now has. But even with that polish, her speeches remain carefully bland, hitting expected notes about worthy causes, without ever saying anything remotely controversial or personal. Meghan, who was a natural public speaker from her acting career and activist work, found the restrictions on what she could say incredibly frustrating. She wanted to speak about feminism, racial justice, political issues, but was told these topics were too controversial. Her speeches had to be watered down, made safer, stripped of the passion and specificity that made them meaningful. According to Scobie and Durand, Meghan felt she was being silenced, forced to speak without really saying anything, and this contributed to her decision to leave royal life. Let me tell you about the rules around relationships and friendships, because even royal women's personal relationships are monitored and controlled. Royal women are expected to maintain friendships primarily with other royals or with people from aristocratic or upper-class backgrounds who understand the protocols and won't embarrass the family. Friendships with people from different backgrounds, especially anyone in the media or with public platforms, are discouraged because of confidentiality concerns. Royal women are expected to be friendly with each other, to present a united front, even if personal relationships are strained. The rumoured tension between Kate and Meghan, the Kate made Meghan cry, or Meghan made Kate cry, stories that dominated tabloids, reveal how difficult this expectation is. According to Meghan's account in the Oprah interview, she and Kate had a disagreement about flower girl dresses before Meghan's wedding. Kate was upset. Meghan apologised and sent flowers, and that should have been the end of it. But the story was leaked and distorted in the press, creating a narrative of rivalry between the two women. The palace did nothing to correct the false narrative, and Meghan felt hung out to dry, blamed for tension that was normal and had been resolved privately. The rule seems to be that royal women must support each other publicly while privately managing whatever tensions exist. And when media creates false narratives, they're expected to stay silent rather than defend themselves. Dating and romantic relationships before marriage are heavily scrutinized for royal women. Potential partners are essentially vetted by palace security, their backgrounds investigated, their suitability assessed. Kate and William dated for years before marriage, and during that time, Kate's entire life was investigated, her family's background examined for any scandals or inappropriateness. Meghan's past was similarly scrutinized, with tabloids digging up every detail of her previous marriage, her family relationships, her social media posts, looking for anything problematic. According to research by royal correspondents, this scrutiny is intended to prevent unsuitable matches, to ensure that people marrying into the royal family won't bring embarrassment or scandal. But it is also invasive and dehumanizing, treating potential royal spouses as acquisitions to be examined rather than individuals with their own dignity. Now let me tell you about Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth's younger sister, whose story illustrates the personal cost of royal rules particularly clearly. Margaret fell in love with Peter Townsend, a royal equerry in the 1950s. Peter was divorced, and like Wallis Simpson before him, this made him unacceptable as a spouse for a royal. Margaret wanted to marry him, and he wanted to marry her, but the rules forbade it. According to research by biographer Christopher Warwick, Margaret was told she could marry Peter only if she gave up her royal status, her income, her place in succession, essentially exiling herself from her family and position. At age 25, Margaret chose duty over love, publicly announcing that she would not marry Peter. She later married photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, a marriage that was unhappy and ended in divorce. According to Warwick, Margaret struggled with depression and unhappiness for much of her life, and friends believed her early sacrifice of true love for duty haunted her. She drank heavily, smoked heavily, and died relatively young. Her story reveals the psychological cost of prioritizing rules and institution over personal happiness and authentic choice. Let me tell you about Princess Anne, Queen Elizabeth's daughter, whose approach to royal rules has been different from most others. Anne has a reputation for being no-nonsense, direct, sometimes brusque. She doesn't suffer fools, doesn't pretend to enjoy aspects of royal life she finds tedious, and has pushed back against some rules while following others strictly. According to research by royal biographer Ingrid Seward, Anne refused to give her children royal titles, wanting them to have more normal lives. She divorced her first husband and remarried, breaking the divorce taboo that had constrained previous generations. She dresses practically, often repeating outfits, not caring about fashion rules that suggest royals should wear new clothes for every event. But she works harder than almost any other royal, undertaking hundreds of engagements per year, and she is known for her professionalism and dedication. Anne's approach reveals that there is some flexibility in how royal women navigate the rules, that it is possible to be unconventional in some ways while still fulfilling the core duties. But Anne's ability to do this comes partly from her being the daughter of the Queen rather than a wife married into the family, and partly from her strong personality and willingness to endure criticism. Let me tell you about Sophie, Countess of Wessex, who married Prince Edward in 1999 and has quietly become one of the most successful royals in terms of following the rules while maintaining authenticity. Sophie came from a middle-class background, worked in public relations before marriage, and had to adapt to royal life. According to royal correspondent Katie Nicholl, Sophie's early years in the family were rocky. She tried to maintain her PR career after marriage, which led to conflicts of interest and embarrassing incidents. She was criticised in the press for various perceived mistakes, but over time, Sophie learned to navigate the system, giving up her career, focusing on charitable work, developing a close relationship with the Queen, and becoming a trusted, hard-working royal. Her approach is similar to Kate's: follow the rules carefully, avoid controversy, work hard, maintain dignity, don't complain publicly about any difficulties. Sophie has found a way to be content within the constraints, or at least to appear content, which is itself a requirement. According to Nicholl, Sophie is now one of the Queen's favourite family members, precisely because she understands and respects the rules, doesn't cause drama, and does her duty without fanfare. Now let me tell you about some of the most painful rules, the ones about grief and emotion during times of tragedy. Royal women are expected to grieve in specific, controlled ways. They can show sadness at funerals, but it must be dignified, restrained sadness. Crying is permitted but should be quiet, a few tears, not open sobbing. They must maintain composure even in the face of devastating loss. When Princess Diana died in 1997, the royal family's initial response was to follow protocol: private grief, minimal public comment, business as usual. The Queen stayed at Balmoral Castle in Scotland with William and Harry, rather than returning immediately to London, following the rule that royals don't make a public spectacle of personal grief. But the public was outraged. They wanted to see emotion, wanted the royal family to publicly mourn Diana. The pressure became so intense that the Queen was forced to break protocol, returning to London, viewing the flowers and tributes left for Diana, giving an unprecedented television address, acknowledging the public's grief. According to research by royal biographer Robert Hardman, this moment was a turning point, revealing that the old rules about stoic royal grief were out of step with modern emotional expectations. When Prince Philip died in 2021, the images of Queen Elizabeth sitting alone at his funeral due to COVID protocols were heartbreaking. She sat by herself, maintaining dignity and following the pandemic rules that everyone else had to follow, but the image of her solitary mourning was deeply poignant. According to sources close to the Queen, she was devastated by Philip's death, her partner of 73 years gone, but she maintained composure publicly because that is what royal duty requires. She attended the funeral, participated in the ceremony, and then returned to work almost immediately, because stopping for personal grief is not how royalty operates. Think about the emotional toll of this, of never being allowed to fall apart, to rage against loss, to grieve messily and authentically. Royal women must maintain the mask even when their hearts are breaking. Let me tell you about the rules around mental health, because this is where the system's cruelty becomes most apparent. Royal women are expected to be mentally and emotionally strong at all times. Admitting to mental health struggles is seen as weakness, as inappropriate, as letting down the institution. Diana's struggles with bulimia and depression were initially hidden, and when they became public, she was criticised for being unstable and difficult. When she sought help, palace officials discouraged it, worried about how it would look. When Meghan experienced suicidal thoughts and asked for help, she was told that seeking inpatient mental health treatment would be bad for the institution's image. According to Professor Simon Wesley, former president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the stigma around mental health in the royal family is particularly damaging because of their public platform. If royals could speak openly about mental health struggles and seeking help, it would reduce stigma for millions of people. But the rules of royal life make this almost impossible. The institution values image over well-being, stoicism over authentic vulnerability, maintaining the facade over acknowledging human struggles. Prince Harry and William's decision to speak openly about the impact of their mother's death on their mental health was revolutionary. Harry's admission that he sought therapy, that he struggled with anger and depression, that he needed professional help, was a direct violation of the unspoken rule that royals don't discuss such things. But Harry felt that the rule was wrong, that staying silent perpetuated harmful stigma, and that he could use his platform to help others by being honest. The palace was reportedly uncomfortable with Harry's openness, but it resonated with the public. Millions of people appreciated his honesty, felt seen and validated by his willingness to admit struggle. This tension between institutional preference for silence and modern understanding of the importance of mental health honesty is ongoing. Some royals, like Harry and William through their Heads Together campaign, are pushing for more openness. Others maintain the traditional approach of silence. Royal women are caught in the middle, trying to determine how much they can safely reveal without violating rules that are deeply embedded in the institution's culture. Let me tell you about the rule that might be hardest for modern women to accept, the rule about pursuing careers and personal ambitions. Royal women are expected to give up their careers when they marry into the family. Kate gave up her job in her family's party supply business. Meghan gave up her acting career at the peak of her success. Sophie gave up her PR career. These women can do charity work, can have causes they support, but they can't have actual careers with employers, salaries, ambitions independent of royal duties. According to research by Professor Laura Clancy from Lancaster University, whose work examines gender and monarchy, this rule effectively infantilizes royal women, treating them as incapable of managing both a career and royal duties, when in reality many women successfully balance multiple demanding roles. The rule also creates financial dependence. Royal women married into the family don't have their own income. They rely on money from the Duchy of Cornwall or other royal sources controlled by their husbands or the institution. This financial dependence is a form of control, ensuring that women can't easily leave if they're unhappy, can't make independent choices that might displease the institution. Meghan and Harry's decision to pursue financial independence, signing deals with Netflix and Spotify, was seen as violating this rule, monetizing their royal status. But from their perspective, they needed income if they were going to step back from royal duties, and why shouldn't they use their names and platforms to earn money independently? The outrage they faced reveals how deeply embedded the expectation is that royal women should be financially dependent, should not pursue independent careers, should define themselves entirely through royal role rather than personal achievement. Now, let me tell you about the rules around aging, because these reveal how royal women's value is tied to appearance and fertility. Royal women are expected to maintain their appearance as they age, to look polished and elegant at all times. The Queen has famously maintained the same hairstyle and makeup approach for decades, a consistency that is part of her brand. But for younger royal women, there is pressure to look current but not too trendy, age-appropriate but not old, maintain their looks but not appear to try too hard. According to fashion historian Ellery Lynn, royal women's fashion choices are scrutinized more harshly as they age. Kate in her 20s could wear more playful, youthful styles. As she approaches her 40s, she is expected to dress more maturely, more conservatively, more in line with her future role as queen consort. The pressure to remain attractive is intense, but so is the criticism if they're seen as trying too hard to maintain youth. It is a no-win situation, typical of the double standards royal women face. Once royal women are past childbearing age, once they've produced the required heirs, their value to the institution diminishes in certain ways. They're still expected to perform duties, but they're no longer central to the succession, no longer serving the biological function that was considered their primary purpose. According to Professor Clancy, this reflects broader societal sexism that values women primarily for youth, beauty, and reproductive capacity. Royal women experience this in concentrated form, their worth explicitly tied to producing heirs, their appearance constantly judged against impossible standards. Now let me tell you about the rules around royal weddings, because even a woman's wedding day, supposedly the happiest day of her life, is tightly controlled by protocol. When a royal woman marries, almost nothing about the wedding is truly her choice. The venue is predetermined, typically Westminster Abbey or St. Hickley, George's Chapel for senior royals. The guest list is controlled, with protocol dictating who must be invited based on rank and relationship to the royal family. The bride might want an intimate wedding with close friends and family, but instead she gets a state occasion with hundreds of guests she barely knows, foreign dignitaries she has never met, politicians included for diplomatic reasons. According to research by royal wedding historian Alison Ware, royal brides throughout history have had minimal input into their own weddings. The ceremony follows strict Anglican liturgy with little room for personalization. The music is traditional, the vows are standard, the readings are approved by church officials. Modern brides might get to choose small details, a specific hymn or reading, but the overall structure is predetermined by centuries of tradition. The wedding dress is subject to intense scrutiny and must follow certain protocols. It must be modest, covering shoulders and chest appropriately. The train length is determined by rank. The veil style has traditional expectations. The tiara, if worn, must be borrowed from the royal collection, as unmarried women don't own tiaras. Kate's dress, designed by Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen, was kept secret until the wedding day, but it had to be approved by palace officials to ensure it met all protocol requirements. Meghan's dress, designed by Claire Waite Keller for Givenchy, was more minimalist and modern than traditional royal wedding dresses, and some criticised it as too simple or not grand enough. The message was clear: even a bride's dress on her wedding day is subject to public judgment about whether it properly honours royal tradition. The flowers, the cake, the reception, all of it must be planned with protocol in mind. The wedding cake is traditionally fruit cake, though William and Kate had a chocolate biscuit cake as a groom's cake. The flowers must be appropriate to the season and symbolism matters. White flowers signify purity, but certain flowers are avoided for various superstitious or practical reasons. The reception has strict seating charts based on precedence, with the most senior royals at the head table, everyone else seated according to rank and relationship. According to former royal event planner Mark Niemieko, planning a royal wedding involves navigating countless rules and expectations, balancing what the couple might want with what protocol demands. Let me tell you about the honeymoon rules, because even that supposedly private time is regulated. Royal couples are expected to take a honeymoon, but its length and destination are subject to approval. They can't go anywhere too remote or dangerous for security reasons. They can't be gone too long, as royal duties must resume relatively quickly. William and Kate delayed their honeymoon for several days after their wedding because of William's military commitments, then took a private trip to Seychelles. Harry and Meghan went to an undisclosed location in Africa. The honeymoon is supposed to be private, but paparazzi often try to get photos, and the couple must balance their desire for privacy with the public's expectation of some information about the trip. According to royal correspondent Robert Jobson, honeymoons are one of the few times royal couples get real privacy, but even that privacy is limited and temporary. Now, let me tell you about the specific rules that Diana struggled with most, because understanding her particular pain helps us see how crushing these rules can be for certain personalities. Diana was naturally warm, tactile, emotional. She wanted to hug people, to touch them. to connect physically, but royal protocol dictated distance, formality, minimal physical contact. According to Tina Brown, Diana found this almost unbearable. When she visited hospitals, especially children's hospitals, she instinctively wanted to pick up sick children, hold them, comfort them physically. Palace officials initially tried to stop her, telling her it wasn't appropriate, that she should maintain distance, but Diana couldn't do it. She broke this rule constantly, hugging AIDS patients when fear of the disease was at its peak, holding dying children, embracing bereaved parents. These gestures made her beloved by the public but uncomfortable for palace officials who felt she was being too informal, too emotional, not maintaining proper royal dignity. Diana also struggled intensely with the rule about not showing emotion. She was someone who cried easily, laughed loudly, showed her feelings openly. The requirement to maintain a neutral, pleasant expression at all times felt like a torture to her. According to Andrew Morton, whose biography of Diana was based on secret interviews with her, Diana described feeling like she was wearing a mask, that she was constantly performing, never allowed to be real. When she was unhappy in her marriage, she couldn't show it publicly. When she was exhausted or ill, she had to keep smiling. When she was devastated by Charles's infidelity, she had to appear at public events and act as if everything was fine. The emotional strain of this constant suppression contributed to her bulimia and depression. She was literally making herself sick trying to conform to rules that contradicted her fundamental nature. Diana also chafed against the fashion rules in complex ways. On one hand, she loved clothes and developed a sophisticated fashion sense, but she hated the constraint of always having to dress for protocol rather than personal expression. She couldn't wear jeans in public, couldn't dress casually, couldn't experiment with edgy or provocative styles. Every outfit had to be appropriate, modest, elegant. According to fashion historian Ellery Lynn, Diana's fashion choices became a form of rebellion and communication. She used bold colours when she wanted to be noticed, dark colours when she was making serious points. Her famous revenge dress to send a message about her independence. But this was rebellion within constraints. She never truly had freedom to dress as she wished. The rule Diana perhaps hated most was the one about privacy. Royal women are expected to accept that they have no real privacy, that their lives are public property. Diana struggled with the constant press attention, the photographers following her everywhere, the tabloid speculation about every aspect of her life. She wanted private time with her sons, private moments to herself, the ability to go to the gym or shopping without being photographed. But the palace's position was that this was part of being royal, that she had to accept it. According to Morton, Diana felt hunted, trapped, unable to have any normal experiences. She couldn't go to a restaurant without it becoming a news story. She couldn't have a private conversation without worrying it would be leaked. She couldn't trust anyone fully because staff, friends, even family members might talk to the press. This constant invasion, combined with the palace's refusal to protect her privacy or correct false stories, contributed to her paranoia and isolation in her later years. Let me tell you about how Kate Middleton specifically prepared for and manages these rules, because her approach is so different from Diana's and reveals alternative strategies for coping. Kate had the advantage of a long courtship with William, during which she was able to observe royal life from a close distance and gradually prepare herself. According to Katie Nichol, Kate used those years deliberately. She studied how other royal women dressed, spoke, behaved. She practiced curtsying, learned proper formal dining etiquette, took lessons in royal protocol. She even reportedly practiced the car exit technique hundreds of times until she could do it perfectly. By the time she married William, she was as prepared as anyone could be. Kate's strategy has been to follow every rule perfectly, to never give critics any ammunition, to be so flawlessly appropriate that no one can question her suitability for the role. She dresses conservatively but elegantly, repeating outfits to show she is not wasteful, choosing British designers to show patriotism, staying within protocol guidelines always. She speaks rarely and carefully, never saying anything controversial or too personal. She maintains the perfect royal smile, pleasant and warm but never revealing too much emotion. She has mastered the art of looking engaged and interested at boring events, of standing for hours in uncomfortable shoes without showing discomfort, of making small talk with strangers while revealing nothing substantive about herself. According to Professor Kate Williams, Kate has essentially sacrificed her authentic personality to become the perfect royal wife, and we may never know who she really is beneath the carefully maintained facade. Kate's approach has brought her acceptance and generally positive press coverage. The palace loves her because she is so low maintenance, so reliable, so appropriate. The Queen reportedly has great affection for Kate because she reminds her of herself in younger years, dutiful, restrained, committed to service above self. But the cost of this perfection is that Kate has become almost a blank slate, a projection screen for whatever the public wants to see rather than a real, complex person. Some people admire her grace and professionalism, others find her boring or inauthentic, but Kate maintains her composure regardless, following the rules, doing her duty, keeping whatever she truly feels locked away where no one can see it. Now let me tell you about Meghan's specific struggles with rules, because her experience reveals how the system responds to women who don't or can't conform. Meghan came to royal life with an established identity. She was a successful actress, a humanitarian advocate, someone with strong opinions and no hesitation about expressing them. She had her own money, her own career, her own platform. She was used to being independent, making her own choices, speaking her truth. The royal family expected her to give all of that up to transform herself into a traditional royal wife. According to Omid Scobie and Carolyn Durand, the palace wanted to tame Meghan to smooth her rough edges, to make her more like Kate. But Meghan resisted this transformation in ways both conscious and unconscious. She couldn't hide her American informality, her tendency to hug people, to speak directly, to show emotion openly. She struggled with the endless rules about clothing, particularly the pantyhose requirement, which she found uncomfortable and unnecessary. She was frustrated by the inability to speak out about issues she cared about, being told that feminism was too controversial, that discussing racial justice was inappropriate, that she had to stay silent on politics. The palace's response to Meghan's difficulties was to tighten control rather than offer flexibility. Rather than acknowledging that some rules might be outdated, they insisted Meghan needed to try harder to conform. Rather than protecting her from racist press coverage, they seemed to expect her to just endure it. Rather than supporting her mental health struggles, they told her seeking treatment would look bad for the institution. According to the Oprah interview, Meghan felt she was being erased, forced to give up everything that made her who she was, with no support or compassion for the difficulty of that process. The contrast between how the palace treated Kate versus Meghan is revealing. Kate was given years to prepare, was gradually introduced to royal life, was protected and guided. Meghan was thrown in with minimal preparation, expected to immediately perform perfectly, and criticized harshly when she struggled. Some of this difference may be due to racism, to the palace being more comfortable with a white British woman than a biracial American. Some may be due to Meghan's established career and stronger personality, making her seem more threatening. But regardless of cause, the different treatment shows that the rules are enforced more rigidly for some women than others, and that the institution is less willing to accommodate women who don't fit its preferred mold. Let me tell you about the communication rules, because these are particularly insidious in how they isolate royal women. Royal women are expected to communicate primarily through official channels, managed by palace communications staff. They don't give independent interviews, don't write their own social media posts, don't speak directly to journalists without approval. All communication is filtered, controlled, sanitized. This means that when false stories appear in the press, royal women often can't defend themselves. The palace policy is never complain, never explain, which sounds dignified, but in practice means letting lies stand uncorrected. Diana suffered enormously from this rule. Tabloids published false and damaging stories about her. calling her unstable, difficult, a bad mother, and the palace refused to issue corrections. Diana felt voiceless, unable to tell her side of the story. Her decision to cooperate with Andrew Morton's biography and later give the Panorama interview was a direct violation of this rule, but she felt she had no other way to make the truth known. The palace was furious with her for these breaches, but Diana felt justified. How else could she defend herself against constant misrepresentation? Meghan faced the same issue. Tabloids published horrible stories about her, many demonstrably false, and the palace wouldn't issue corrections. When Meghan's friends spoke to People magazine in her defense, Meghan was criticized for not controlling her friends. But she wasn't allowed to defend herself directly, and the palace wouldn't defend her. So what was she supposed to do? Just endure endless false accusations in silence? According to communication experts, this policy made sense in an earlier era when royal mystique depended on distance and when media could be controlled through personal relationships with editors. But in the modern media environment, staying silent allows false narratives to spread unchecked. The rule needs updating, but the institution resists change. Now let me tell you about the education and child-rearing rules for royal children, because these affect royal mothers deeply. Royal children are raised with an understanding of their position and responsibilities from very young ages. They're taught protocol, how to behave appropriately, that their lives are different from normal children's lives. According to research by royal biographer Ingrid Seward, this can be a difficult balance for royal mothers who want their children to have normal, happy childhoods, but also know they need to prepare them for their roles. Diana famously tried to give William and Harry as normal a childhood as possible, taking them to McDonald's Disney World, sending them to regular schools, rather than having private tutors. But she also had to teach them protocol, how to greet people properly, how to behave at formal events. She struggled with this balance, wanting them to be boys but knowing they needed to be princes. Kate faces similar challenges with George, Charlotte, and Louis. She wants them to have playful, carefree childhoods, but George particularly needs to understand his future role as king. At what age do you tell a child that their entire life is already mapped out, that they'll one day have enormous responsibility and minimal personal freedom? How do you maintain normalcy while preparing them for extraordinary circumstances? The schools royal children attend must be carefully chosen. They need to provide excellent education but also security and discretion. The children of classmates must be from families who understand and respect royal protocol. Friendships must be monitored to ensure no one is using the royal children for fame or access. According to Katie Nicholl, William and Kate chose schools for their children that are prestigious but not too showy, that have experience with high-profile families that can provide both normalcy and appropriate security. Even birthday parties for royal children must follow certain protocols. The guest lists are vetted, security is present, and there is awareness that any photos taken could end up in tabloids. Royal mothers want their children to have fun, normal birthday parties, but they're always aware of the ways their children's lives are different and more controlled than other children's. Let me tell you about the rules around royal pregnancies in more detail, because these deserve deeper exploration. When a royal woman becomes pregnant, the announcement is carefully timed and worded. Traditionally, announcements wait until at least 12 weeks to ensure the pregnancy is viable. But if the royal woman has severe morning sickness requiring hospitalization, as Kate did with all 3 of her pregnancies, the announcement must come earlier to explain why she is cancelling engagements. The announcement doesn't come from the royal couple directly, but through official palace statements. According to Victoria Arbiter, this removes any spontaneity or personal touch from what should be a joyful personal moment. The couple can't excitedly tell friends and family and let the news spread naturally. Everything must be coordinated, controlled, official. Once pregnancy is announced, the royal woman's body becomes public property in a new way. Everyone has opinions about how she should dress, whether she is too thin or has gained too much weight, whether she is working too hard or not hard enough. With Kate's pregnancies, there was constant media speculation about every aspect. What would the baby be named? What would Kate wear leaving the hospital? How quickly would she lose the baby weight? This intense scrutiny adds stress to what is already a vulnerable time. According to research on prenatal stress, constant media attention and public judgment can increase pregnancy complications and postpartum mental health issues. Royal women are experiencing normal pregnancy anxieties plus the added pressure of public performance and judgment. The rule about appearing with the newborn hours after birth is particularly controversial. Kate appeared on the hospital steps with each of her babies mere hours after delivery, dressed, styled, made up, smiling for cameras. This set a standard that many women found oppressive. Childbirth is exhausting and often traumatic. Most women need days to recover, time to rest, heal, bond with their baby in private. But Kate had to perform, had to show the heir to the public, had to look perfect doing it. She reportedly had a hairdresser at the hospital, carefully planned outfits, was briefed on what to say to journalists. According to maternal health experts, this immediate public appearance sends a harmful message that women should bounce back instantly from childbirth, that natural postpartum recovery is somehow shameful or shouldn't be visible. Breastfeeding is encouraged but must be done privately. Royal women can't nurse in public, can't be photographed breastfeeding. This is considered too intimate, too immodest, even though public breastfeeding is legal and increasingly normalised in Britain. The double standard is clear. Royal women must fulfill traditional maternal roles, but must do so invisibly, maintaining an image of perfection without showing any of the messy reality of motherhood. Naming choices, as mentioned earlier, require Queen approval, but there is also intense public speculation and judgment. When William and Kate chose George, Charlotte, and Louis, all names with strong royal connections, it was seen as appropriately traditional. When Harry and Meghan chose Archie, a less common royal name, and Lilibet, the Queen's personal childhood nickname, there was controversy. Some felt Archie was too informal, not sufficiently regal. The Lilibet choice was criticised by some as too intimate, appropriating a private family name. The message is that even in naming their own children, royal women's choices are subject to public approval and can never be purely personal. Let me tell you about the rules around divorce, because these have evolved but remain restrictive. Historically, divorce was essentially impossible for royals. The Church of England didn't recognise divorce, and as head of the church, royals were expected to uphold its teachings. This is why Edward VIII had to abdicate to marry Wallis Simpson, and why Princess Margaret couldn't marry Peter Townsend. But this changed over time. Princess Margaret divorced in 1978, Princess Anne divorced in 1992, and Charles and Diana divorced in 1996. According to Anne Seber, these divorces represented a massive shift in royal protocol, acknowledging that sometimes marriages fail and divorce is necessary. But even though divorce is now permitted, it is still seen as a failure, a mark against the royal woman involved. Diana's divorce was particularly painful. She lost her HRH title, was distanced from the family, faced restrictions on what royal events she could attend, had her role with William and Harry limited. She kept her apartments at Kensington Palace and continued some charitable work, but she was no longer truly royal. The message was clear: if your marriage to a royal fails, even if it is not your fault, you pay the price. Meghan and Harry's decision not to formally divorce, but to step back from royal duties and move to America was a different kind of separation. They're still married, still technically royal, but no longer working royals. The palace stripped them of their HRH titles in official capacity, required they stop using Sussex royal branding, and made clear they were no longer representing the Queen. It was a negotiated settlement that avoided formal divorce, but still represented a rupture. According to Omid Scobie, Harry and Meghan feel they had no choice, that staying in the system was destroying Meghan's mental health and threatening their marriage. but the palace portrays it as them abandoning duty, choosing personal happiness over service. The reality is that the system couldn't accommodate them, and rather than change the system, the institution let them go. Now let me tell you about Princess Grace of Monaco, born Grace Kelly, the American actress who married Prince Rainier III in 1956. Grace's story is often romanticized, the fairy tale of a Hollywood star becoming a real princess. But the reality was much more complex and painful. According to research by biographer Donald Sputto, Grace had to give up her acting career completely when she married Rainier. She was at the peak of her fame, an Oscar winner, one of the most sought-after actresses in Hollywood, but royal protocol forbade her from continuing to act. Rainier felt it would be inappropriate for the Princess of Monaco to appear in films. So Grace walked away from the career she loved. She struggled with this loss for the rest of her life. Monaco was a small principality with limited opportunities for meaningful work. Grace felt isolated, missed her career, missed Hollywood, missed America. She was expected to fulfill princess duties, appear at events, support charities, produce heirs. She had 3 children relatively quickly, fulfilling the heir requirement. But, according to friends, she was often unhappy, felt trapped, and turned increasingly to alcohol to cope. Grace wanted to return to acting. Hitchcock offered her a role in Marnie in the early 1960s, and she desperately wanted to do it. But when news broke that she might return to film, there was public backlash. The people of Monaco felt it was beneath a princess's dignity to act in movies. Rainier was opposed. Grace had to turn down the role, and according to Spotto, she cried for days. She never acted professionally again. In 1982, at age 52, Grace died in a car accident under circumstances that remain somewhat mysterious. She apparently suffered a stroke while driving, causing the crash. But some friends believed her heavy drinking and the stress of her constrained life contributed to her death. Grace's story reveals that even in a different monarchy, the rules for royal women were similar. Give up your career, your ambitions, your identity, and live entirely for royal duty. The fairy tale marriage came at enormous personal cost. Let me tell you about the rules around health and illness, because even when royal women are sick, they're expected to maintain certain appearances. Royal women are expected to be healthy, energetic, always ready to fulfill duties. When they're ill, they're supposed to hide it as much as possible and recover quickly. Queen Elizabeth II has famously almost never missed engagements due to illness. She has cancelled events only a handful of times in 70 years, usually only when absolutely medically necessary. This sets a standard that is almost impossible for others to meet. Kate's hyperemesis gravidarum, the severe morning sickness she experienced in all 3 pregnancies, forced her to cancel engagements, which was seen as appropriate because pregnancy illness is understandable, but she was back to royal duties as soon as physically possible, not given extended time to recover. Meghan reportedly suffered similar pregnancy symptoms, but felt pressure to continue working, to not seem weak or demanding. According to Dr. Emma Broughton, a physician who has studied royal health, this expectation that royals power through illness can be dangerous. It discourages seeking medical help, encourages working when rest is needed, and sends a harmful message about ignoring health needs for duty. When royal women do become seriously ill, it is often kept private for as long as possible. Princess Margaret's declining health in her later years was largely hidden from public view. She had suffered strokes and other health issues, was in a wheelchair, but appeared publicly as little as possible to avoid showing weakness. The rule seems to be that royal women should be healthy or invisible, present, and perfect or absent entirely, with no middle ground where they can be publicly imperfect or vulnerable. Mental illness is particularly stigmatized. As discussed earlier, Diana and Meghan's mental health struggles were seen as weaknesses, as failures to cope with the demands of royal life. Rather than acknowledging that the demands might be unreasonable, that the system might need to change, the institution's response was that these women were insufficiently resilient. This attitude is slowly changing, partly due to William and Harry's advocacy for mental health awareness. But the fundamental tension remains. Royal life creates enormous psychological stress, but royal women are expected to handle that stress invisibly, never admitting difficulty, never asking for accommodation. Now let me tell you about the religious rules, because faith and religious practice are tightly regulated for royals. The monarch is the head of the Church of England, and all royals are expected to be practicing Anglicans. They must be baptized and confirmed in the Church of England, must attend church regularly, must have their children baptized in Anglican ceremonies. According to Dr. Edward Norman, a historian of the Church of England, this religious requirement limits who can marry into the royal family and how royal life is practiced. Catholics were historically forbidden from marrying royals, a rule that was relaxed only in 2013. Even now, a royal can marry a Catholic, but that Catholic cannot become king or queen, as the monarch must be Anglican. This religious restriction has caused pain throughout history. Royal women who wanted to convert to other faiths, or who were less religious than expected, had to suppress those feelings and conform to Anglican practice. Attending church services is a public duty for royals, particularly at Christmas and Easter, when the royal family attends services at Sandringham or Windsor. These appearances are photographed and scrutinized. Royal women must dress appropriately for church, behave reverently, appear devoutly engaged with the service. Whether they're actually religious or not is almost beside the point. The performance of religiosity is what matters. Meghan had been baptized and confirmed in the Catholic Church, but converted to Anglicanism before marrying Harry. This conversion was presented as a personal choice, but it was also a requirement for marrying into the royal family. According to Omid Scobie, Meghan took the conversion seriously, studying with the Archbishop of Canterbury, genuinely engaging with Anglican theology. But she also understood it was necessary to fit in, that maintaining her Catholic faith would have created complications. This religious conformity is another way the institution controls royal women, requiring them to adopt even spiritual practices that align with institutional needs rather than personal conviction. Now let me tell you about the rules around public crying and displays of grief, because these reveal the emotional straitjacket royal women must wear. When Diana died in 1997, the images of William and Harry walking behind her coffin, visibly devastated but maintaining composure, broke hearts around the world. But what many people don't realize is that this stoic grief was required by protocol. Royal children, like royal adults, are taught from young ages that public displays of strong emotion are inappropriate. They must grieve quietly with dignity, showing sorrow but not breaking down. According to child psychologist Dr. Penelope Leach, this forced emotional control during trauma can have long-term psychological effects. Children need to express grief openly, to cry, to fall apart if necessary, to process loss authentically. But royal children are denied this, taught that duty and appearance matter more than emotional health. The women in their lives, their mothers and grandmothers, enforce these rules even as their hearts break for the pain they're causing. Diana tried to give William and Harry more emotional freedom, encouraging them to express feelings, to cry when they needed to. But the institution pushed back, concerned she was making them soft, unprepared for their future roles. After her death, the boys were thrust back into the rigid emotional control that she had tried to soften. Let me tell you about the handshake rules, because even this simple gesture is tightly regulated. Royal women are trained in the proper handshake, firm but not too firm, brief, accompanied by eye contact and a pleasant smile. The handshake should last no more than 2 to 3 seconds. They should never initiate the handshake with someone of higher rank. They wait for the Queen or senior royals to extend their hand first. According to etiquette expert Micah Meir, there is even a technique for extracting one's hand from an overly enthusiastic or prolonged handshake. A gentle pulling back combined with turning slightly to the next person. Royal women practice this for hours, because every public engagement involves dozens or hundreds of handshakes, and each one is photographed and analysed. A handshake that is too brief seems cold, too long seems inappropriate, too firm seems aggressive, too soft seems weak. The perfect royal handshake is another impossible standard that women must master. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when handshakes became dangerous, royal protocol had to adapt. The traditional greeting was temporarily replaced with verbal greetings and slight bows or nods. According to royal correspondence, some royals found this liberating, freed from the physical contact they'd always been required to maintain. But as restrictions lifted, the handshake requirement returned. Another reminder that royal life follows protocols regardless of personal preference or even public health considerations. Let me tell you about Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, daughters of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, whose experiences reveal what happens to royal women who are somewhat outside the core working royal family. Beatrice and Eugenie are princesses by birth, granddaughters of the Queen. But they're not working royals. They have jobs, careers, relatively normal lives, though they still attend some royal events and are subject to certain protocols. According to research by royal biographer Sarah Bradford, Beatrice and Eugenie occupy an uncomfortable middle ground. They're royal enough to face intense media scrutiny and public judgment, but not royal enough to have the palace's full protection and support. Their fashion choices are criticised, their careers are questioned, their relationships are fodder for tabloids, but they don't have the press office support that William, Kate, Harry and Meghan had. They must navigate public life largely on their own. Beatrice and Eugenie have both spoken about the difficulty of this position. They face expectations about behaviour and appearance because of their royal status, but they don't have the resources or support that working royals receive. When Beatrice married Edbordo Mapelli Mozzi in 2020, her wedding was scaled down partly due to COVID, but also because as a non-working royal, she wasn't entitled to the grand state occasion that William or Harry received. The message was clear: even within the royal family there are hierarchies, and women's experiences vary based on their position in those hierarchies. Now let me tell you about Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, who will become Queen Consort when Charles becomes king, and whose journey into the royal family was unlike anyone else's. Camilla was Charles's mistress during his marriage to Diana, the other woman vilified by the press and public for years. When Charles and Diana divorced and Diana died, public opinion was so negative toward Camilla that it seemed impossible she would ever be accepted. According to research by royal biographer Penny Junor, Camilla's integration into the royal family was a slow, carefully managed process. She and Charles had a quiet civil ceremony in 2005, not a grand wedding. She took the title Duchess of Cornwall rather than Princess of Wales, which still belonged emotionally to Diana. She kept a low profile, did her royal duties quietly, didn't seek attention. Gradually, through years of steady, uncontroversial work, she won a degree of acceptance. Camilla faced unique rules and expectations because of her position. She had to prove herself worthy, to overcome the scandal of her past, to show she could be a proper royal wife. She couldn't make mistakes, couldn't be controversial, had to be nearly perfect in her conduct. According to Junor, Camilla found this exhausting but necessary. She wanted to marry Charles, wanted to be part of his life, and she accepted that the price was years of proving herself, of following every rule, of never putting a foot wrong. The question of what title Camilla will hold when Charles becomes king has been controversial. Traditionally, the king's wife is queen consort, but because of the history with Diana, there was initial discussion of Camilla taking a lesser title, princess consort. The palace has since confirmed she will be queen consort, but the controversy reveals how royal women's titles and status are tied to public opinion and past behaviour in ways that men's titles are not. Charles will be king regardless of his past infidelity, but Camilla's status as queen is still somewhat questioned, still seen by some as illegitimate because she was the other woman. This double standard, where women are judged more harshly than men for the same behaviours, pervades royal protocol and public perception. Let me tell you about the rules around palace living. because even where and how royal women live is controlled. When a woman marries into the royal family, she doesn't get to choose where she lives. Residences are assigned based on rank and need. William and Kate live in Kensington Palace in London and Amer Hall in Norfolk. Properties owned by the Crown and provided to them. They don't own these homes, can't sell them, and could theoretically be asked to leave if they fell out of favour, according to research by royal property expert Christopher Warwick. This arrangement keeps royal women dependent on the institution. They're living in royal properties surrounded by royal staff, with their domestic lives managed according to royal preferences. Meghan and Harry initially lived in Nottingham Cottage, a small property on the grounds of Kensington Palace. It was charming but modest, only 2 bedrooms, definitely not the grand accommodation many people imagine for royals. They later moved to Frogmore Cottage, which required extensive renovations paid for initially by taxpayer funds, though Harry and Meghan later repaid the renovation costs when they stepped back from royal duties. The controversy over Frogmore Cottage's renovations reveals another double standard. When William and Kate's Kensington Palace apartment was renovated at a cost of millions, there was some criticism, but it was generally accepted as necessary for future king and queen. When Harry and Meghan's much more modest home was renovated, the criticism was intense and personal, with accusations that they were wasting taxpayer money. The message seemed to be that core working royals deserve comfortable accommodations, but those further from the throne should be grateful for whatever they get. The interior design of royal residences is also subject to protocol. According to interior designer Amelia Thorpe, who has studied royal homes, there are preferences for traditional styles, antiques, formal arrangements. Royal women might have some input into decorating their private apartments, but public rooms must maintain a certain standard of traditional British elegance. Meghan's reportedly more modern, minimalist taste was seen as another sign of her not fitting in, of her being too American, too contemporary, not sufficiently respectful of tradition. Now, let me tell you about the rules around security and protection, because royal women's safety is taken seriously, but is also used as a form of control. All working royals receive security protection paid for by the taxpayer, but the level of protection and who qualifies for it is carefully controlled. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from working royal duties and moved to North America, their security was removed. According to Harry's testimony in the Oprah interview, this removal put his family at serious risk. He had to scramble to arrange private security, costing millions of dollars, because the palace had decided they no longer deserved protection. The decision about who gets security and who doesn't is made by government committees, supposedly based on threat assessment, but it is hard not to see it as punitive, as the palace withdrawing protection from those who step out of line. Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, despite being the Queen's granddaughters, don't receive full-time security because they're not working royals. According to sources close to the princesses, this creates constant anxiety. They're recognizable potentially targets, but they must pay for their own security or go without. Royal women who have security live under constant surveillance. Protection officers are with them almost always, in cars at events, even sometimes in their homes. According to Diana's former protection officer Ken Worf, this constant presence can feel both protective and suffocating. Diana sometimes gave her protection officers the slip, wanting moments of genuine privacy, but this was seen as reckless and irresponsible. The rule is that royal women should accept the surveillance as necessary, should never complain about the loss of privacy that constant security creates. Let me tell you about the rules around staff and household management, because royal women are simultaneously employers and constrained by protocol in how they manage their households. Royal women have staff, ladies-in-waiting private secretaries, assistants, dressers, hairstylists. These staff help with royal duties but also monitor and report back to senior palace officials. According to research by royal household expert Brian Hoey, staff loyalty is complicated. They work directly for the royal woman, but ultimately serve the institution. If a royal woman does something inappropriate, staff are expected to report it. This creates an environment where trust is difficult. Diana felt she couldn't trust her staff, believed they were reporting on her to Charles and palace officials. She was right. Some staff were providing information about her behavior, her friends, her activities. Meghan had similar experiences, feeling that staff were undermining her, complaining about her to the press, creating a hostile work environment. The allegations that Meghan bullied staff were investigated, but the results were never made public. According to Omid Scobie, Meghan felt these allegations were part of a campaign to discredit her, to paint her as difficult when she was simply trying to manage her household effectively. The truth is probably more complex. Meghan came from a professional background where she was used to being direct, setting high standards, making quick decisions. Royal staff were used to more traditional, hierarchical, slower-paced work environments. The clash of working styles combined with possible prejudice and the high-pressure environment created conflict. The rule seems to be that royal women should be grateful for their staff, should manage them gently and indirectly, should accept that the staff ultimately serve the institution rather than them personally. Direct management, clear expectations, holding staff accountable, these normal professional behaviours can be seen as inappropriate aggression when done by royal women. Now let me tell you about the rules around books and interviews, because royal women's stories are controlled even after they leave the royal family or after death. Diana's decision to cooperate with Andrew Morton's book Diana, Her True Story, was a massive breach of protocol. She secretly provided information through an intermediary, essentially telling her side of the story without directly violating the rule against giving interviews. When the book came out in 1992, its revelations about her unhappy marriage, Charles's infidelity, her mental health struggles shocked the world. The palace was furious. This was seen as the ultimate betrayal, airing private family matters publicly, breaking the sacred rule of royal discretion. But from Diana's perspective, she had no other option. The palace wouldn't correct false stories, wouldn't defend her, wouldn't let her speak for herself. The book was her only way to make the truth known. Diana's later Panorama interview in 1995, where she spoke directly about her marriage and famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," was even more shocking. She had been told that giving the interview would have consequences, and it did. The Queen reportedly told Charles to divorce Diana after the interview aired. Diana's willingness to break the silence rule, to tell her truth regardless of consequences, made her both beloved by the public and despised by the institution. Meghan and Harry's decision to speak with Oprah in 2021 was similarly controversial. They revealed details about conversations regarding Archie's skin colour, about Meghan's mental health struggles, and the palace's refusal to help, about Kate making Meghan cry, and the palace letting false narratives stand. The palace's response was brief and cold. Recollections may vary. This response revealed the fundamental tension. Meghan and Harry felt they needed to tell their truth, to defend themselves, to explain why they left. The palace felt they had violated the most sacred rule, had damaged the institution by speaking publicly, had prioritized personal grievances over loyalty to the family. According to communication experts, this clash represents a generational divide. Older generations like the Queen believe strongly in the never complain, never explain rule, see public silence as dignity and discretion. Younger generations, raised in an era of transparency and personal storytelling, see that silence as enabling abuse and suppressing truth. Royal women are caught in this tension, trying to determine when silence is dignity and when it is complicity, when speaking out is courage and when it is betrayal. Now let me tell you about Princess Diana's relationship with the press, because it reveals the impossible position royal women are in regarding media. Diana was the most photographed woman in the world, hounded by paparazzi wherever she went. She hated the intrusion, the lack of privacy, the distortion of her life in tabloids. But she also understood that media attention gave her power. that positive press coverage made her beloved and protected her to some degree. According to Tina Brown, Diana learned to use the press strategically. She would tip off friendly photographers about where she would be, ensuring flattering photos. She gave exclusive information to preferred journalists. She used fashion and body language to send messages, knowing every detail would be analysed. This manipulation of media was brilliant but also exhausting. Diana was constantly performing, constantly aware of how she was being perceived, using media as both weapon and shield. The palace hated Diana's media strategy. They felt she was too accessible, too willing to court publicity, not maintaining proper royal mystique. They wanted her to follow the traditional approach: minimal access, carefully controlled official photos, no personal relationships with journalists. But Diana had learned that the traditional approach left her voiceless, allowed the palace to control her narrative. She chose a different path, one that gave her power, but also made her more vulnerable. The paparazzi chase that led to her death in 1997 was the tragic culmination of this media obsession. Diana spent her entire adult life being hunted by photographers, and in the end, that hunt killed her. The question of media responsibility for her death was debated extensively. Were the paparazzi who chased her car guilty of manslaughter? Was the media that created demand for Diana photos morally responsible? Or was it just a tragic accident? According to journalist Martin Bashir, who conducted the Panorama interview, Diana's relationship with media was deeply ambivalent. She needed it but hated it, used it but was destroyed by it. This ambivalence is common among royal women. They need positive press to maintain public support, but they resent the intrusion and lack of control over their own stories. Let me tell you about Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, who married Prince Andrew in 1986, and whose experience reveals what happens when a royal woman repeatedly breaks rules and loses palace protection. Sarah, known as Fergie, was initially popular, seen as fun and down to earth, but she struggled with royal protocol from the beginning. She was too casual, too friendly, too willing to show emotion. She gained weight after her pregnancies and was cruelly mocked in the press. She was photographed in compromising situations, including the infamous incident where her financial advisor was photographed sucking her toes while she was still married to Andrew. According to Sarah's own memoir, she felt overwhelmed by royal life, unsupported by the palace, and made mistakes born of desperation and poor judgment. Her divorce from Andrew was finalized in 1996, and she lost her HRH title and royal status. Since then, Sarah has struggled financially, taken on various business ventures of questionable taste, and remained a somewhat embarrassing figure for the royal family. But she and Andrew have remained close, living together for periods, co-parenting their daughters successfully. Sarah's story reveals the harsh reality. Royal women who break too many rules, who embarrass the family too often, are cast out. They lose titles, status, financial support, protection. They're left to fend for themselves, and their subsequent struggles become further proof that they were never suited to royal life. The contrast between how the family has treated Sarah versus how they treated Camilla is instructive. Both women were involved in scandals. Both broke rules and violated protocols. But Camilla was Charles's chosen partner, the woman the future king wanted to marry. So the institution worked to rehabilitate her image, to bring her into the fold, to make her acceptable. Sarah was Andrew's ex-wife, embarrassing, but ultimately unimportant to the succession. So the institution cast her out and left her to manage on her own. The message is clear: the rules and their enforcement depend on the royal woman's value to the institution. Those who matter get support and second chances. Those who don't are expendable. Now let me tell you about the rules around aging and succession planning, because royal women's lives change dramatically as the next generation comes of age. When William and Kate had children, the Queen reportedly felt relieved. The succession was secure, the monarchy's future ensured. But this also meant that Camilla's importance diminished. She is Charles's wife and will be queen consort, but she is not the mother of future kings. Kate is, which gives her a different kind of power and importance. According to royal historian Robert Lacey, this generational transition creates complex dynamics among royal women. The older generation must step back, make way for the younger generation to take centre stage. The Queen has managed this gracefully, gradually reducing her duties while remaining the ultimate authority. But it is not always smooth. There are reportedly tensions about when Charles will take over more responsibilities, when William and Kate will fully step into senior roles. Royal women are expected to navigate these transitions gracefully, to step back when it is time, to support the next generation without seeming resentful or diminished. Diana's death prevented her from experiencing this transition, but one wonders how she would have managed it. Would she have gracefully become the king's mother, supporting William from the background, or would she have struggled to step out of the spotlight to let Kate become the primary royal woman? Given Diana's love of attention and her complicated relationship with protocol, the transition might have been difficult. Kate will face this transition someday when George marries and has children. She'll have to step back, let her daughter-in-law become the future queen, support rather than lead. How will she handle that after decades as the primary royal woman? It remains to be seen. Let me tell you about the rules around international tours and state visits, because even royal travel for official duties is tightly choreographed. When royal women travel internationally, every aspect is planned months in advance. The itinerary is packed, often with 4 or 5 engagements per Dalton mints. Outfits must be chosen carefully, considering local customs, climate, diplomatic messaging. According to royal tour planner Sir David Manning, royal women's clothes on tours are analysed for symbolic meaning. Wearing local designers honours the host country. Choosing certain colours can send diplomatic messages. Every outfit choice is strategic, planned by teams of advisors. Royal women must pack extensively for tours, bringing multiple outfit options for each event, having backups in case of spills or wrinkles or weather changes. They travel with hairstylists, makeup artists, dressers, private secretaries, protection officers, sometimes medical staff. A royal tour isn't a vacation. It is intense diplomatic work performed under constant scrutiny. During tours, royal women must be constantly on. They smile, shake hundreds of hands, make small talk with strangers, show interest in every cultural performance and factory tour, appear engaged and energetic even when exhausted and jet-lagged. According to Lady Anne Glenconner, who accompanied Princess Margaret on many tours, the physical and emotional toll is immense. By the end of a long tour, royal women are often exhausted, sometimes ill, but they can't show weakness until they're back on the plane home. Diana was famous for her emotional connections on tours, touching people, showing genuine compassion. But this authenticity was exhausting for her. She couldn't maintain the royal distance that made tours less emotionally draining. She felt everything, absorbed others' pain, and it wore her down. Kate has learned to maintain more boundaries, to be warm but not too emotionally invested, to protect herself while still appearing engaged. It is a survival strategy, necessary for sustaining royal life long term, but it also means sacrificing some authenticity. Meghan struggled with the pace and intensity of royal tours. On her tour of Australia, Fiji, Tonga, and New Zealand in 2018, she was in early pregnancy, suffering morning sickness, but had to maintain a grueling schedule of engagements. She performed beautifully in public, but was reportedly exhausted and unwell in private. The palace's response was that this was normal, that royal women simply had to push through. But Meghan felt unsupported, pushed beyond reasonable limits, expected to sacrifice her health for public duty. Let me tell you about the unspoken rules about intelligence and competence, because there is a tension around royal women being too smart or too accomplished. Royal women are expected to be educated, well-spoken, knowledgeable about their causes. but they can't appear too intellectual, too ambitious, too accomplished in ways that might overshadow their husbands or threaten traditional gender roles. Diana had no university education, no professional training, and this was sometimes held against her. Critics suggested she wasn't bright enough for royal life, wasn't capable of understanding complex issues. But when she did show intelligence and strategic thinking, particularly in her media management and charitable work, she was criticized for being manipulative and scheming. She couldn't win. If she appeared simple, she was mocked. If she showed intelligence, she was mistrusted. Kate has a university degree in art history, but she is careful never to appear too intellectual. Her speeches are warm and personal, but not deeply analytical. She speaks about emotions and experiences, not policy or theory. This is strategic, staying within acceptable bounds of royal female intelligence. Meghan's university degree and her articulate, confident speaking style were often used against her. Critics called her pretentious, overly ambitious, trying to be something she wasn't. The subtext seemed to be, know your place. Don't try to be too smart. Don't outshine your husband or other royals. According to feminist scholar Dr. Laura Clancy, this reflects broader societal discomfort with female intelligence and ambition. Royal women are supposed to be decorative and supportive, not intellectual and independent. Those who violate this expectation face backlash. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight into the hidden world of royal rules, for having the patience to understand these invisible chains that bind royal women. I hope these stories have given you a deeper appreciation for the complexity of royal life, for the psychological and emotional costs of living under such rigid control, for the courage it takes for women to maintain their humanity and authenticity within such constraining systems. As you drift off to sleep tonight, safe in your own space, able to make your own choices about what you wear, how you sit, who you love, what you say, I want you to appreciate those freedoms. The fairy tale of royal life is seductive, the glamour and elegance and privilege, but behind the glittering facade is often loneliness, constraint, and the constant pressure to be perfect. The women we've met tonight, Diana, Kate, Meghan, Elizabeth, and others throughout history, are all remarkable in their own ways, some for their ability to master the rules, some for their courage in breaking them, all for their resilience in navigating a system designed to control them. Their stories remind us that autonomy, authenticity, and the freedom to be ourselves are precious gifts, not to be taken for granted. Sweet dreams, my friends. May you wake up tomorrow appreciating the freedom to choose your own path, to express your authentic self, to live without invisible rules dictating your every move. May you have compassion for those who live under such constraints, and may you never take for granted the simple freedoms that make life livable. The ability to speak your mind, to show your emotions, to make choices about your own body and your own life. Sleep well tonight, knowing that you are free in ways that even princesses and queens are not. Good night, dear friends, and may your dreams be filled with the joy of authentic self-expression and the peace that comes from living according to your own values, not rules imposed by others. Rest peacefully, and remember that sometimes the most valuable crown is the one you choose for yourself, not the one placed on your head by tradition and expectation. Sweet dreams and good night.